Hey traders, welcome back to the weekly Forex Forecast. Now going into this week, opening up with euro dollar because there's a very interesting setup here in euro dollar. We have in the daily chart here had the big break of the double top, confirmed with momentum, and that's what you want to see. Anytime you get a reversal pattern, you want to see it breaking with momentum. And the dollar itself has had a big rally and it looks like it needs to pause. It needs to breathe, needs to correct. No market moves in a straight line. So what I'm anticipating next week is some dollar weakness. Now I'm not looking to short the dollar itself necessarily, but using instead that weakness in the dollar, if we start to get that Monday, Tuesday into Wednesday, to look for new long opportunities in the dollar. Now in euro dollar, one of the things I'm going to be looking at, I want to see if we can pull back, retest perhaps the underside, so stair step the underside of this double top. And if we can do that, we're also going to be trading above the 1.09872. And this is an opportunity to potentially capture the turn of a second wave. Why? Because we've got the double top reversal. Very often you get that with momentum. That's a one wave, very often technically speaking. And if we pull back and bounce and we start to trade above our weekly upper bound at the 1.09872, this is where you tend to get in the daily chart those kind of reversals and waves and trends changing. So this is the opportunity I'm looking at. I really only want to be short euro dollar or doing nothing next week. I don't want to be buying it. And if we can time that, and hold on to it, this could be the start of a third wave when we take out this low down here. Now, if we think about this just on a weekly basis, because that's obviously a much bigger move, but think about this heading into next week. If we're going to initially get euro dollar strength, let's say we bounce, take out the upper bound in this market, then the dollar sells off. Yes, we're looking at that for the potential next leg up. We're using that weakness to try and step in and buy the dollar next week. But think about this also in terms of specifically next week. Any dollar weakness is going to see the euro, the pound, the Swiss franc near term outperform perhaps some of those other currencies as well. And so we're going to be looking at not just US dollar strength in today's video, but I'm also going to be looking at Swiss franc strength and also euro strength. You could also look at pound strength next week. Okay, so moving on to the portfolio selection part, and the first thing that jumps out here heading into next week in the quantitative data is we're seeing somewhat of a deflationary regime. In deflationary trading regimes, you tend to see commodity currencies underperforming, and then you see the US dollar outperforming, and you tend to also get the EU majors kind of outperforming the commodity currencies. Well, we're seeing this now in the data. The Japanese yen is very risk off, but we're not seeing, a kind of crash or flight to safety kind of setup where the Japanese yen would appreciate. We're seeing a kind of deflationary regime as crude oil starts to weaken, and this of course sees the US dollar go up, but also we're seeing flows come out of the Japanese yen into the dollar, whereas primarily it's a reversal of the previous selling of the dollar and the strengthening of the yen. So going into next week, I do like still, once again, New Zealand dollar shorts as my favorite setup to the downside. And of course, we'll be looking at that primarily versus the Swiss franc, the US dollar, and also the euro. And I'm also going to be looking at the Canadian dollar next week. Now, we do have the Bank of Canada coming up next week as well. So I'm only going to be looking at Canadian dollar shorts after the Bank of Canada interest rate decision, because the markets, they tend to correct into the event itself. In this case, we have, the Bank of Canada. So specifically next week, the Canadian dollar markets are likely to correct into this and do nothing. So we're going to be looking at Canadian dollar shorts in today's video, but after the interest rate decision next week. And the third currency to the downside I like is the Japanese yen, because as we're seeing the US dollar strengthen, a lot of those flows are coming out of the yen into the US dollar. So we are going to be looking at CAD franc to the downside, US dollar CAD to the upside, and also EurCad to the upside. And we're also going to be looking at franc yen to the upside. We're going to be looking at US dollar yen to the upside, and also euro yen to the upside as well. Now, interestingly, remember what I said to you when we looked at euro dollar. I do favor shorts, but we might get that bounce first. Now, if we get that bounce first, you may see a little bit of strength in the dollar, maybe some strength in the commodity currencies to begin the week, but I'm using that as an opportunity, to short the yen on any strength that we see, to short the Canadian dollar, to short the New Zealand, and primarily being long the Swiss franc, the dollar, and the euro versus those. Okay, so kicking off the watch list, as always, with crude oil. Now, crude oil is a market that's been performing to the upside, and there's been fears of an escalation in the Middle East been driving the price up. But we saw this reverse to the downside last week on the news that Israel were planning to retaliate to Iran, but not by attacking their oil infrastructure. And that was what was suggested, and this caused all of those concerns, which were leading to a bid in crude oil to reverse, and we saw a liquidation. Those longs booked their profits. Now, last week I was actually looking to be long. I did in fact buy this after the liquidation, traded this double bottom here. We didn't get a major bounce. I did this in real time with GMT members, got about 1.5% out of it, but we didn't get any reversal higher. So coming into this week, I do think there's a good chance we pull back and test the upper bound, but I'm only looking to be short this week. My bias has reversed. The quantitative data has reversed and says we should now be prioritizing shorts in crude oil. And again, we see this leading into the Forex markets themselves, because as inflation comes down with crude oil, we start to see the commodity currencies underperforming, which is why they're one of the top shorts next week. And we start seeing outperformance of the US dollar, but also some of those EU majors. So any pullback in crude oil next week, aside from last week, and hopefully we get a better bounce than this, although this was a decent one, it wasn't a full bounce, it was about a half bounce. But any kind of pullback in crude oil next week, if we can breach to 73.16, this is the area I'm going to be looking for a potential reversal in crude oil, dropping down to the lower time frames, looking for those double tops, double bottoms in this case. We got this kind of double bottom last week. I'm going to be looking for a 1 or 2 day reversal to the downside. If for whatever reason, although it's unexpected as a plan B, whether I'm short here or not, if this blasts through and takes out the second upper bound, above the 76.98, we become extremely overbought intra-week or during the week. And this will be the second place I'll be looking for a 1 or 2 day reversal to the downside. Whether I'm short here and looking to cost average this and get out for break even, or whether this is, not being shorted, I haven't shorted it here and this is an initial position, I'll be looking for this. And the third thing you can look for, of course, is look for the market to start to pull back towards its upper bound. So you get this correction intra-week, moving above the moving average. And then once we start to push towards this, you can get a fast market which breaks back down below the moving average, very much like this. Moving down, you break above it, consolidate, and then that gives you your bull flag set up for the next leg up. So you can look for this pullback. It doesn't test the upper bound. This is the third thing you can look for. Breaks back down below its moving average, settles into it because the moving average will follow it, and then you get your bear flag set up intra-week down to the 65.51. That's the profit target I'd be looking for in terms of any intra-week shorts in crude oil. Why? Because once we trade below this, you become oversold intra-week. So you have a good chance of bouncing from below this level. So any trade below the 65.51, great profit taking opportunity next week in crude oil. I can either be short or do nothing in crude oil next week. I cannot buy this market next week. Kicking off the Forex markets then with the New Zealand pairs. New Zealand dollar short is my favorite theme heading into next week, starting with New Zealand dollar franc. We really did nothing last week in this market. I was looking to the downside in this market last week, but we did nothing. We just kind of chopped around, moved sideways. So what I'd like to see is I'd like to see this continue higher this week, breaching the 0.5327. That's where we turn overbought intra-week in a market that I'm looking to be short. And this will be where I'll be looking in real time next week with GMT members for a 1 or 2 day reversal to the downside. If we blast through here, whether I'm short or not, once we trade through the 0.5403, we become extremely overbought intra-week, and this would most likely be the sign of a bigger reversal. So it's not expected, but if this happens, this would be the second place above here. I'd be looking for a 1 or 2 day reversal to the downside. And the third thing is you can see us already correcting, consolidating above the moving average. We start to push back towards the upper bound, and instead of testing it, we break down out of this correction with momentum, and we get the consolidation into the moving average. That's where you get your bear flag set up, and you can look for that follow through intra-week down to the 0.5174. Below there we become oversold intra-week, and also right at the prior low over here. So great profit taking target for a weekly time horizon in New Zealand franc for next week. Next is New Zealand dollar. Again, I can either be a seller of this market next week or do nothing. I'm only interested in short opportunities. What I'd like to see is all of this is one move. See how we haven't even broken back above the moving average, and it's starting to run out of steam. Now, we looked at the beginning of the video with euro dollar, big sell-off, looks like it needs to breathe. Well, this is true for all of the dollar pairs. You know, if euro dollar starts to push higher, New Zealand dollar will follow it. US dollar CAD will sell off, you know, for a few days as well. So that is ideally what I want to see next week. I want to see this trading above its moving average and testing and trading above the 0.6156. We become overbought intra-week. I'm going to start to drop down if we do this next week, and I'm going to look for momentum to be fading, reversal patterns on 1 hour, 15 minute, 5 minute time frames. I'm going to be looking for a 1 or 2 day reversal to the downside. If we blast through here, the level at which we become extremely overbought intra-week is the 0.6241. So this is the second place. Whether I'm short with a position moving against me or not, if this is an initial position, I'm going to be looking for a 1 or 2 day reversal. And the third thing, as always, is if we start to move back towards the upper bound and instead of testing it, you get the momentum breakout to the downside, you can look for the moving average to follow and then look for that bear flag pullback into the moving average and the follow through down to, in this case, the 0.5986. And the third New Zealand pair is Euro New Zealand. So I'm only interested in long positions next week in this market. I cannot sell this market. We're already correcting and consolidating below the moving average. What I would like to see is I'd like to see this come down, breach the 1.7698. We also have a left shoulder over here if we test this. This is going to be an area next week. If we breach this, I'm going to be looking for long opportunities for a 1 or 2 day reversal to the upside. If for whatever reason, as unexpected as it is as a plan B, we break through here, whether I'm long already or not, if we trade below the 1.75004, this is the second place next week, and again, that would be a new low. So we would be looking at essentially a trend reversal in that case. Not expected, but if it happens, this is the second place, I'll be looking for a 1 or 2 day reversal, whether I'm risk managing this or this is just a new position. And the third thing you can look for, especially as we've broken with momentum and we're consolidating, if we start to see the US dollar, which is strong, pulling back, as I think is likely the case, then we could see the euro start to outperform from the beginning of the week. As 57% the dollar index, that's what the euro is, the weighting of the euro within the composition of the DXY. Well, if that happens and you start to see weakness, there's every chance you could start to see Euro New Zealand breaking out intra-week as the US dollar pulls back, and then you can look for that follow through as it hugs into the moving average and you get that bull flag set up into the prior high and also into the 1.8095. Also interesting to note, if you do get a reversal before it takes out this low, whether it's down to the left shoulder with a kind of textbook reversal or it starts to break up, as soon as we take out this high, we could be looking again at a second and third wave in Euro New Zealand, because this would be an inverse head and shoulders reversal pattern. Okay, so moving on to the Japanese yen short theme that I'm going to be looking at in next week's trading. And we can see that the Swiss franc, which is my favorite Japanese yen pair next week, has already started to trade below its moving average. I'd like to see this continue at the start of the week, which stair-step this high even, which would be nice. And we're also trading into and below the 170.68 in that scenario. What that means is we become oversold intra-week, and this is where the odds turn in our favor for a reversal. Usually, by the time you get down here, you're looking at 1 or 2 days to the upside. That's the mandate that I'm going into the week with, to try and capture 1 to 2 days worth of movement, expected movement out of 5 days. So that's what I'm going to be looking at in this market next week. If we break through here and we test this low and we breach the 168.45, this is the second place I'm going to be looking for a 1 or 2 day reversal, because we become extremely oversold intra-week. And again, I might already in this scenario be long and just risk managing that first position, or I might not have a position and then this becomes a very good initial position. The third thing, of course, you can look for is as this tracks down, we may not get there, and it's a good sign. You get a strong market or a fast market, we break back above the moving average turns up, and then we start to see this consolidating towards it, and that gives you your bull flag set up into the 175.15. Next is US dollar yen. Now I like US dollar yen heading into next week. I can either be long or do nothing. I cannot short this. What I want to see is, I want to see this. You see how it's lacking momentum. I'd like to see this break, and I'd like to see a little bit of momentum bringing this down to the 147.12. If it does that, we become oversold intra-week. This is where next week I'm going to be looking for a 1 or 2 day reversal in real time with GMT members. And we also stair step this high, which is nice. We may even push through into this high. So this is a great area to start to look for the odds to turn in your favor if you break down into this area next week. If for whatever reason, as unexpected as it is, as always, we blast through there and end up below the 144.70, we have roughly a 9 out of 10 chance as being priced by the market of a reversal for 1 or 2 days to the upside below this level. So that's the second place. Whether I'm long already or not, I'll be looking for a potential long setup next week. And the third thing, you start to move back down towards the lower bound and you break back above it intra-week. So this just turns into a correction and a breakout. That's where you can look. It would be a little bit shorter than this. You look for that pullback and then you get the bull flag set up into the upper bound at the 151.95. Great profit taking opportunity to the upside in US dollar yen for any longs next week. And the final yen pair is Euro yen. I can either be a buyer of Euro yen or do nothing next week. I cannot short this market. And again, you can see this has just been kind of flat, just moving sideways. Even the moving average is flat. So I'd like to see this come down and breach the 160.04. That's where we start to get the odds turning into our favor. Roughly 7 out of 10 chance of this bouncing for 1 or 2 days to the upside. That's the primary setup I'm going to be looking at next week. If we break through here, we become, and there's a double bottom actual retest over here, but this would be the second place. Below the 157.60, we become extremely oversold intra-week, and we would trade right into this. This would be a great opportunity, especially for an initial position. You know, if we blast through here, I'm not already long, and we trade below here, that'd be the second place. I'd be looking for a 1 or 2 day reversal to the upside, whether I'm long from here or not. And the third thing, of course, is as we start to consolidate, look for this to break back above its moving average. You know, with momentum, you want to see this really drive above it, not just kind of chop around, but really, you know, drive. You get that momentum pushing above. It should be clear. You shouldn't have to squint like I do sometimes at the numbers here in the video. But it should be clear. You should be able to see this clearly breaking above its moving average. The moving average starts to turn, and then you look for that bull flag setup into, in this case, the 164.93. Great profit taking opportunity to the upside above the 164.93 next week in Euro yen. And wrapping up the Forex universe then with the Canadian dollar short theme. Now, you can see CAD franc has really lacked volatility, and this is because we've got the BOC next week. You tend to see these markets dry up, not just the week of, but also the week before. And sometimes when you get low volatility in a week, someone will say in the comments that these ranges are too big for the markets this week. But really it's just a perception issue, because if I scroll out here, you can see just how far and fast this market can actually move. So all we're looking at here is we're just looking at a very low kind of volatility environment for CAD franc. What I'm going to be looking for then with the Canadian dollar pairs next week is the following. I only want to be involved after the Bank of Canada interest rate decision. And I'm going to be looking at trading it reactively. We're expecting, or the market's expecting, a 50 basis point cut. So I would imagine the two scenarios are going to be either we get the 50 basis point cut and we start to see this market kind of drifting into its upper bound because everything's as expected. If an event comes out as expected, then this can be, you know, in many ways the same as the event really not happening at all, because the market's expected it, it's priced it in. So I do think that's a likely outcome, where we have the 50 basis point cut, the market kind of reacts in a neutral way, and on that, we kind of treat this just as we would if there wasn't an interest rate decision. So in that scenario, I'd be looking for CAD franc to come up, take out the prior high over here and breach the 0.6330. If it does that, I'm going to be looking for a 1 or 2 day reversal to the downside after the BOC. The second thing is not a neutral outcome, but a bearish outcome. So we get the 50 basis point cut and we start to see the Canadian dollar suffer straight away. We get momentum to the downside. In that scenario, you can look for the bear flag setup, where you get the breakdown on the interest rate decision, the moving average tends to follow it, then you get your kind of pullback, bear flag, and follow through after the interest rate decision, in this case down to the 0.6197. So now we've looked at a neutral outcome for the Canadian dollar, a bearish outcome for the Canadian dollar. What happens if we get a bullish outcome? Maybe, let's say theoretically, I don't think this is likely, but let's say theoretically, they don't cut and they hold rates and it's expected 50. You're going to see the Canadian dollar rally hard. Now in that scenario, as unlikely as it is, if we breach the 0.6396, I'm still only looking to be a seller of CAD franc next week. I can't buy it. So that would be the third place. Whether I'm short here or not, I'd be looking for a 1 or 2 day reversal to the downside in CAD franc. And that would most likely be on a bullish reaction after BOC. Next is US dollar CAD. I can only be a buyer or do nothing. I cannot sell this market next week. So if we get a neutral outcome from the BOC on Wednesday, I'm going to be looking for this market to just drift lower, take out the lower bound at the 1.3694. If it does that, we become oversold intra-week in a market that I want to be long. That's where I'm going to be looking for a lack of momentum, looking for those inverse head and shoulders, double bottom kind of patterns. And I'm going to be looking for a 1 or 2 day reversal to the upside. If we get, as I think is also very likely, either a neutral or bearish outcome on the 50 basis point cut, then I would be looking also to see if we get this kind of rally off of the interest rate decision. Maybe you come down A, B, C, and then you get the ABC breakout on the interest rate decision. You can look for the bull flag post BOC and the follow through into the profit target and above the 1.3907, where this market becomes overbought intra-week. And the third thing I'd be looking for is if we get, for whatever reason, as unexpected as it is, a very bullish reaction from the Canadian dollar, and we blast through this level, the second place I'd be looking for a long opportunity is below the 1.3587. And again, that would be whether I'm already long from here and it's moved against me, or if I sidestep it and I get the opportunity to buy it here from an initial position. And finally, we have EurCad, another market that looks, like these ranges are huge, but it's really just because of the lack of volatility. But this market can easily move these distances next week, especially with an interest rate decision. So exactly the same as the others. If we get a neutral outcome, I'll be treating this just as if there wasn't an interest rate decision at all or news event. I'd be looking for this to drift lower, take out these lows down here and the 1.48790. This is where I would be looking for a buying opportunity next week for a 1 or 2 day reversal after the BOC interest rate decision. The second thing is the two most likely outcomes, I think, next week. We get the 50 basis point cut and we get weakness reactively. You can look for that breakout. Maybe it comes down, double bottoms here, and then breaks out higher on the interest rate decision because we get CAD weakness with the 50 basis point cut. Then we start to see that bull flag set up and the follow through rally into the upper bound next week at the 1.51190. And the third and final thing, although I think it's the least likely outcome, is if we get a bullish response from the Canadian dollar for whatever reason, we blast through the lower bound and take out the second lower bound, turning extremely oversold intra-week at the 1.47590. This would be the second place I would consider a long opportunity to the upside in terms of being oversold and then extremely oversold. Either way, I cannot buy this market next week. Okay, so wrapping up the video, as always, with gold and silver. Now, gold and silver are both long ideas going into next week. I do favor gold longs over silver longs. And usually, when we've got a stronger dollar, this is a headwind towards gold and silver. I do think this is going to be a headwind over the next couple of months. However, we're in this period where we're seeing both the dollar and gold and silver go up together. So I don't want to fight that. The quantitative data is saying we should still be long. It has been pretty much long the whole way up here. And I do want to be long gold and silver going into next week, given the opportunity. Any pullback in gold, we've actually had this kind of breakout from this correction. Any pullback in gold is going to be the opportunity if we break down below the 2672.80. We retest these highs over here, potentially even this high. This is the area I'm going to be looking for momentum to fade for a 1 or 2 day reversal to the upside in gold next week. If we blast through here, very unexpected. Not sure what would cause this, hence why it's unexpected. But if we blast through here and breach the 2623.92, we become extremely oversold intra-week. And it's the second place I'd be looking for a 1 or 2 day reversal, whether I'm long already or not. And the third thing, of course, you can look for is look for the market to break back down below its moving average, start to make its way towards the lower bound. And then if you get the breakout, essentially what we're looking at here is this kind of bull flag breakout. It corrects down, doesn't turn oversold, but reverses and starts to break up in the direction we're looking for. Look for it to hug the moving average. And in this case, you can look for that bull flag set up into the 2770.55 in gold next week. I'm wrapping up the video with silver. We've got this correction breakout. You can see we tried to break above here, failed. Look at this really weak close. Sold off, corrected, and look at this. This is a breakout with momentum. This is how you know anybody who shorted over here has liquidated their position. Either their stop loss has been taken out or they've manually closed the trade, and that is a short covering rally. As you see stop losses get taken out, or you see shorts covering their short positions, they're buying it back and you get new breakout traders stepping in. We don't want to fight this. Momentum precedes price, and this is likely going to set up a nice additional rally to the upside, a follow-through rally to the upside over the next week or so. What I'd like to see there is I'd like to see this pull back. If we do pull back, retest the prior high and breach the 3214, we turn oversold intra-week. This is going to be a great place to start to look for those reversal patterns for a 1 or 2 day reversal to the upside. If we reverse hard and come all the way down to the 30.57, again, I would be very surprised if that happened next week. It's highly unlikely, but it's possible. Anything's possible in these markets. It would require some major catalyst to reverse this. If it did that, this would be reactively the second place I would look for a 1 or 2 day reversal to the upside in silver, whether I'm long here with an initial position or not. And the third thing, just like with gold, such a strong market, you can actually look for the kind of intra-week breakout where it pulls back, corrects towards the lower bound, and then instead of testing the lower bound, you get this market just breaking back above, the moving average turns up, you get your bull flag set up as it hugs it and then moves away into the 35.28. Very much like this, breaks above, moves into it, moves away, moves into it, moves away. So that is it from me for today, guys. As always, I hope you enjoyed today's video, and if you did, why not consider joining us in the GMT training room each day, where I look at the best markets as well as sharing real-time setups that I'm personally looking at trading with members as part of our GMT training program. Don't forget, you can also get a 2-week free trial to the cutting-edge hedge-trading app used in today's video by heading over to www.hedge-.com. Access to the cutting-edge hedge-platform is included with every GMT membership.